Hello dear students, now let us start with the very fifth chapter and for you the third head of income. One of the most important heads of income for the examination also, which we call in short PGBP. The full form is Profit and Gain from Business or Profession. There is a typing error over here, please correct it. It will be section 28 to 44 dB. Section 28 to 44 dB. Profit and gain from business or profession. Now see one thing, that whosoever is doing the business will be taxable over here, their net profit will be taxable over here, but while calculating the net profit, some of the income we cannot take in PGBP, some of the income we should always tax in PGBP, some of the expenditure we have to deduct while computing net profit, while some of the expenditure is to be disallowed, we cannot deduct while computing PGBP income. All this we will be learning in this chapter. Again, just to make sure that you know this thing, we are not going to do each and every section of this chapter. We are going to do each and every important topic of this chapter. However, let me assure you, 80 to 85% of the chapter will be revised. And on the last day, it is not sufficient. It is much more than sufficient. Now, PGBP. The very first thing, that section 145. Section 145 says that PGBP income is taxable as per the method of accounting followed by assessee. If assessee is following cash system of accounting, the PGBP income will be taxable as and when received, as and when extended. But if assessee is following accrual system of accounting, then PGBP income will be taxable as and when accrue and not received. Now, which kind of incomes will be taxable in PGBP? Section 28 basis of charge, few important topic I have covered over here, which says that number one, any profit and gain from a business or profession which is carried on at any time during the previous year will be taxable. Under which head? PGBP. So if you are having a business or profession, you are getting profit or gain, then it will be taxable under which head? PGBP. Number two, if during the business you receive any kind of benefit, perquisite, etc. Like you are doing a business and you are receiving gift from the customer, some kind of asset from the customer without any charges, then this kind of asset, the market value of that will always be taxable under the head PGBP. Then if you are a partner in any kind of a partnership firm, you are getting profit, interest, remuneration, bonus, commission, so on and so forth. Any kind of things that you are receiving from a partnership firm, for a partner, it will be always taxable under the head PGBP. And last but not the least, if you have the inventory, you are converting it into your capital asset, the reverse case, then capital gain. You have an inventory, you are converting it into a capital asset, then on that date, whatever is the fair market value, it will become your deemed PGBP income. Now here I have written a general format that how we compute generally PGBP income. First, we always start with net profit as per P&L. Whatever is the excess of income over the expenditure, or whatever is the net profit given in the P&L, we start with that. From that, we are looking at the debit side of P&L, that which kind of expenses are not allowed. We have already deducted in P&L. So now it is a time to disallow. Now it is a time to add back. Which kind of income is credited to P&L? If some income is there which is not credited to P&L, we have to tax the same in PGBP. So now add it. Acha, some of the expenditure which may not have been debited to P&L, but it should be deducted while computing PGBP income. So now we will deduct the same. Certain kind of income which is credited to P&L, but actually it should be taxable in any other head of income, or it is not taxable only. So that kind of income also we have to reduce. And then what we will get is called as profit and gain from business or profession, that is the PGBP income. Now the very first section for computation is section 29, which says that manner of computation, which says that compute PGBP income from section 30 onwards. Now let me show you an overall graph. From section 30 to 36, we will be learning every specific deduction. Section 37 subsection 1 is all about general deduction, which never gets covered in any other section, get covered in 37 subsection 1. Section 40 and section 40A and section 43B is talking about disallowances, which expenses are not allowed. Section 41 is talking about deemed income, which is always taxable in PGBP. And last 44AA, 44AB, 44AD, 44ADA, 44AE, this kind of sections are there, which all are what? Books of accounts, audit, presumptive income. All we will be looking in this chapter. Now the very first section is section number 30. See, if you are having a building, you can do RTI, means you can do on that rent expenditure if building is not owned by you, repair expenditure, you can pay rates and taxes, municipal tax, property tax, and you can pay insurance also for that building. Now this rent, repair, rates, taxes and insurance, that is 3 RTI. 3 RTI. This you can deduct while computing your PGBP income, but this can be deducted only if the building is used for your business or profession. If building is not used for your business or profession, you can't deduct any of this expenditure. Section 31 is the similar section. If you have plant, machinery or furniture, business asset, on that also you can do repair expenditure, insurance expenditure. This repair and insurance of plant, machinery, furniture you can deduct under section 31 from your net profit. If it is already debited to P&L, do nothing because it is already debited. If it is not debited from P&L, please deduct it separately. One more point. This definitions, this expenditure is allowed only if this asset are used for your business and profession. What about sir rent expenditure? It is allowed under 37 subsection 1 because not covered over here. Sir, what about taxes? Tell me the tax which is levied on plant, machinery and furniture. No tax, and that's why no deduction also. Then a very important section, section 32, depreciation. See, if you have a capital asset, intangible asset, tangible asset, any of them, you must have purchased those assets, and while purchasing the same you must have done some of the expenditure, which in a way not allowed in P&L directly because it is not the expenditure of one single year, it is the expenditure of so many years. And that's why you are doing amortization, which is called as depreciation, section 32. Point number 1, if it is debited to P&L as per your own method, always disallow the same, add back, and then recalculate the depreciation in accordance with section 32, which will be deducted from your PGBP income. Point to be noted is, to claim the deduction of depreciation, it is compulsory and not optional. Explanation number 5 of section 32, it is always compulsory. You can claim the depreciation only if number 1, you are the owner of the asset, number 2, you are using it for your business and profession. Now sir, whether your monthly depreciation available, means if I have purchased the asset, let's say in 1st January 2021, so whether I will get only 3-year depreciation, 3-month depreciation? No. In income tax, either you get full year depreciation or you get depreciation only for half year. There is no month-wise calculation, either full year or half year. Sir, when will get half year depreciation? Ask a question that in the year in which you have acquired the asset, whether it is the same year in which you have put to use. If yes, then for how much period you have put to use the asset? Let's say I have put to use for less than 180 days. Means after 3rd October 2020, from 4th October onwards, you have put to use from 4th October onwards some days, then you will not get full depreciation, you will get only half depreciation of that asset. But in any other case, it will be full depreciation, means you have put to use for more than or equal to 180 days, full depreciation. Now let's say in 2021 I have purchased the asset but put to use in the year 21-22. Then remember, in the year 2021 you have not used the asset, and that's why in the year 2021 you will get 0 depreciation. But in the year 21-22, irrespective of number of days, you will get full depreciation, because the year in which acquired and the year in which put to use is not the same year. It is different year. So half depreciation concept never applicable. Then from 21-22 onwards, you will get full depreciation. Understand one more point. In income tax, depreciation is never calculated on each and every asset separately. You please see how much asset are having the similar nature, on which similar rate of depreciation is applicable. Club them in a single block, and on the ending of the year, see how much value is that for the block. On that, apply the rate which they have given by WDV method, it will become your depreciation. So here block of asset to be followed, WDV method, and the rates are specified. Now how to compute that WDV for calculating depreciation? So let's say I have purchased, my opening WDV is 100. I have purchased two assets worth rupees 10. I have sold some of the asset for rupees 15. How much is the original cost of those sold asset? I never mind in income tax. I just have to consider sale value. So opening WDV plus your purchase cost minus the sale value, what monies you have received, deduct it. Balance will be called as your WDV. So on that you will apply the depreciation. Point to be noted, in the year in which you sold the asset, no depreciation for that year, because the entire sale value you are deducting from the block. So ultimately you are not counting depreciation in this year. So depreciation as on WDV as on 1st April 20 plus actual cost minus monies received, it will become your WDV for 2021. On that apply the rate of depreciation, it will become your depreciation, and after that you will get depreciated value. Now, before we move to the rate of depreciation, let me explain you, whenever I use the word plant and machinery, that word plant includes computer, laptop, books, equipment, vehicle. That means what? That means even on this four asset of computer, laptop, books, equipment and vehicles, I have to apply depreciation. However, furniture, building, livestock is not plant and machinery. For them, either separate depreciation is available, or for the asset like livestock, there is no depreciation at all. Now, what are the rate of depreciation they have given, which I have to apply on that WDV? If we are talking about building which is used for the residential purpose, like for example, JK Shah classes have guest house in so many cities. These are the buildings which are used for the residential purpose by the faculties. So that is said 5% depreciation on that. But if any other building like office premise, factory, godown, hotel, warehouse, etc., on that 10%. Any kind of furniture or electric fittings vagera, on that 10% depreciation. In plant and machinery, number one, if you have motor car, not a taxi or not a motor car which you are using for hiring the business, normal motor car, then the rate of depreciation is 15%. But if that motor car was acquired and put to use in between 23rd August 19 to 31st March 2020, if in this period you would have purchased the motor car, whenever you are claiming the depreciation, you will be claiming 30%. But if we are doing the depreciation for a motor bus, lorry, motor car used as a taxi, then instead of 15%, the rate will be Sida 30%. But if those assets are also acquired and put to use in between this specified period in which recession was started in automobile sector, 23rd August 19 to 31st March 20, whenever you claim depreciation, it will be 45% and not 30%. If you have general plant machinery equipment, normal plant machinery, then 15%, but computer, laptop or books, on that 40%. Any intangible asset you are having, on that you have to apply 25%, patent, copyright, etc., 25%. Now one example I have written, let's say I have a plant 15% rate of depreciation. Opening WDV 10 lakh, I purchased one more asset on 1st May 20, can I say more than or equal to 180 days prior to 3rd October, 2 lakh rupees. I sold one of the plant for rupees 30,000. What is the WDV amount? Can I say 10 lakh plus 2 lakh minus 30,000, that will be 11 lakh 70,000. On that directly apply 15%, that will be 175,500. This is what my depreciation under section 32 is. But if the same plant I would have purchased on 1st November 20 instead of 1st May, then can I say I have used this for less than 180 days? So the amount which belongs to this new machinery, on that I have to only apply 7.5%, that is half depreciation. So what I have to do, first of all find out the WDV, that becomes what, 11 lakh 70,000. Now identify how much is the amount of opening WDV from this and how much is the amount of new addition. Remember, the sale value will be first deducted from opening WDV, balance if any will be deducted from purchase cost. You have to always follow FIFO method. So from 11 lakh 70,000 up to 9 lakh 70,000, it will be from opening WDV. How come 9 lakh 70,000? 10 lakh minus 30,000 sale value. On that apply 15%, 145,500, and balance 2 lakh is from the new purchase which is for less than 180 days. On that only half depreciation, that will be 15,000. The total depreciation will come to 1,60,500. Now, let's say I have opening block of 100 rupees. I purchased one asset for 10 rupees. I had in opening 5 asset, one I purchased, so total 110. I sold only 3 asset for 130 rupees. Can I say the block value will become negative 20? Even though I have asset, some of the asset with me, but still the block value becomes negative. I can't claim depreciation now onwards. This negative value will become my short-term capital gain under section 50 and my block will reduce to 0. But let's say in the similar example, I sold all the 6 asset for 90 rupees. Even though I have 20 rupees in my block, I can't depreciate it because I don't have any asset. So again my block will become 0. So sir, what about this positive 20 rupees of block value? It will become your short-term capital loss under section 50. But let's say I sold only 5 asset for 90 rupees. Only one asset is left out along with the value of 20 rupees. Asset is also there, value is also there, continue depreciation, there will be no short-term gain or no short-term loss. So let me just give you a crux. If you have asset in the block along with the positive value in the block, continue depreciation, there will be no capital gain. But if there is no asset in the block, even though there is some value, short-term capital loss. If you have asset in the block but there is no value remaining, the value becomes negative, short-term capital gain. So if actual consideration, sale consideration is less than your block value, then see whether any asset exists, continue depreciation. If no asset exists, short-term capital loss. If your sale value is more than your block value, the negative value will become short-term capital gain. But in this year, you will claim no depreciation because the block becomes 0. Now, government has given some concession, and the concession is for those who are doing manufacturing or production of any items or goods or electricity. See, each and every person gets normal depreciation. For plant and machinery, generally 15%, computer वगैरह 40%. If you are also doing manufacturing, so you will get a special concession. And what is the concession? That in the year in which you purchased any new plant and machinery, not furniture or building, any new plant and machinery, then obviously you will get normal depreciation at the rate of 15%. Along with that, in addition to that, in the very first year, you will also get one more depreciation, which we call additional depreciation. And that additional depreciation percentage will be fixed 20%. And if less than 180 days you have used the asset, then in this year, additional depre 10% and the balance 10% you can claim in the very next year. So remember, first of all, this benefit is received only by a person who is doing manufacturing or production. Number 2, this benefit is only applicable if you are purchasing a new asset during the year. After the second year of that asset, only in the first year you will get additional depreciation, not every year. And the rate is fixed 20%. So you are a manufacturer, you purchase the new plant and machinery and it should be eligible plant and machinery. So question arises, sir, what is not eligible? Not eligible means on that normal depreciation you can claim, you can't claim additional depreciation. So which plant and machinery is not eligible? Number 1, ship, aircraft. Can I say ship and aircraft is not the asset from which you can do manufacturing. Then second-hand plant and machinery, either purchased within India or outside India. If it is second-hand plant and machinery, no additional depreciation. Any asset which you have actually installed in your office or residential accommodation, can I say that also becomes not a part of manufacturing wing, and that's why no additional depreciation. Road transport vehicle, motor car, motor bus, like that, no additional depreciation. Any plant and machinery whose actual cost is allowed as a deduction, like if you are purchasing an asset for scientific research under section 35, 100% of the cost is allowed as a deduction. So for that you will not get additional depreciation, it becomes ineligible. What is the rate of additional depreciation? I just said it is 20% of the original cost, only in the first year of purchase of new machinery. If put to use for less than 180 days, then in this year 10%, in the next year balance 10% of the original cost. But however, this whole additional depreciation is to be deducted from the WDV. Now, one more point is also there which I have not written over here. If you have purchased the asset in the year 1920 for less than 180 days in 4 backward states, that is Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal and Telangana, then in that year the depreciation for this 4 state additional depre rate was 35%, not 20%. So if you would have acquired for less than 180 days in 1920, then in that year you would have claimed 17.5%. So in this year also the rate would have been 17.5%. But if you purchase any new asset in 2021, even in this 4 state, now the amendment has came, depreciation will be still 20%, not 35%. So that was an irrelevant point, that's why I have not covered over here. Transitional provision you can consider. See the references which you can see after many sections that you need to see after that concept if you want. Now, if you are engaged into production of electricity, generating and distributing electricity, power supply, you have an option to claim the depreciation as per SLM method and not WDV method. Generally, you have to compulsory follow WDV method. But if you are a person who is engaged into the supply of electricity, you can go for SLM method also. You can go for SLM method. But if you will go to SLM method, you will not get the benefit of additional depreciation. If you choose WDV method, you will get additional depreciation. So for a trader, SLM method not allowed, additional depre not allowed. For a professional, SLM method not allowed, additional depre not allowed. For any other manufacturer, SLM method not allowed, additional depre definitely allowed. For power sector unit, you can go for SLM, but then additional depreciation will be applicable only if you follow WDV method. Now, if you will follow WDV method, number one, once you claim WDV or once you claim to go to SLM, your decision will be full and final. You cannot change in your entire life. Number two, 180 days wala rule applicable. Number three, there is no block of asset system in that. You have to depreciate each and every asset separately if you follow SLM method. The rates will be differ and that rates is not there in your syllabus. Now, if you are following SLM method, when you can follow, when you are into electricity generation and you want to follow SLM method, you have to depreciate each and every asset individually. Now, what if that asset is sold, discarded or demolished in future? Let's say the opening value of that asset after depreciation in this year was 100. You are selling only for 80. So, balance 20 rupees is still remaining in that asset, but the asset is no more with you. So, this 20 rupees is actually the loss, but it is a business expense that is called as terminal depreciation. This 20 rupees you will get as a deduction in PGBP, terminal depreciation. Let's say you are into electricity manufacturing, you are following SLM method. You have one asset, the value is 100. You are selling for 120. Can I say there will be 20 rupees of gain? So that gain should be taxable to PGBP. That is called as balancing charge. But what government said? Only that much amount will be taxable in PGBP for which you have claimed deduction earlier. For example, I am an electricity company. I have purchased one asset few years ago and the amount for which I have purchased was rupees 1 lakh. I went for SLM method and I claimed depreciation in each year, and in this year the opening value has become 60,000. Tell me, how much depreciation in total I have claimed for this asset in my PGBP income? 40,000 rupees. Let's say this asset of 60,000 I am selling for 1,50,000. So what is my total gain? 60,000 minus 150, 90,000 is my gain. How much will be taxable in PGBP? Only up to 40,000. The balance 50,000 will be taxable in capital gain. This is called as balancing charge concept. This concept is applicable only if you are electricity company and you are following SLM method. If you are following WDV method, then it will never be taxable in PGBP. It will be taxable under capital gain. So here, what is balancing charge? 41 subsection 2. If your sale value is more than the opening value of the asset, if you are following SLM method, from the gain amount up to the amount of depreciation claimed earlier will be taxable in PGBP, balance capital gain. Now the last question arises is, sir, while calculating the depreciation, what is actual cost? What we add into the block? It is the total cost which is done by employee to purchase that particular asset. But here, one small proviso is there, very important proviso, which has been asked in recent July 21 exam also. And the proviso is, if you acquire any capital asset, any depreciable asset, and the payment you are doing is in excess of rupees 10,000. Payment is done to a single person in a single day in excess of rupees 10,000. Otherwise then by account pay check, account pay draft, electronic clearing system ECS or other electronic mode, Paytm, GPay, credit card, debit card, net banking, etc. Then those actual cost you cannot add to your depreciation, you cannot add into your block. Means by account pay check, account pay draft, ECS, other electronic mode, you can do n number of transaction for n number of amount, no problem, we will add it into our block. But let's say a asset worth rupees 12,000 I have purchased through cash, cross check, bearer check in a single day from a single person, then this 12,000 is more than 10,000. I cannot add into my block of asset. What if this amount was 10,000 or 9,000? If below 10,000 and you are doing payment through any mode, no problem, we will add into our block and we will get depreciation also. Here other electronic mode means credit card, debit card, net banking, IMPS, UPI, RTGS, NEFT, BHIM, Aadhaar Pay, GPay, Google Pay, etc. etc. Now there are some special cases which you have to consider while looking at actual cost. Number one, if you have a building which you have previously used for your personal purpose and now in this year you are bringing it to your business. Let's say in past 2 years I have purchased a building for my residential accommodation, I am converting into my business. So I cannot add that original cost into my block. What I have to see, if I would have used for my business, how much depreciation would have been deducted up to now? Deduct notionally those depreciation and what is the current value of that building, that much will be added to the block of asset. But if instead of building there is any other asset, motor car, furniture, etc., then no notional depreciation to be deducted. Whatever was your actual cost, it becomes, whatever was your original cost, it becomes your actual cost and that much will be fully added to the block of asset. Second point, whenever you are purchasing any asset on which GST is applicable and if under GST Act you are going to claim the credit of that GST as a input tax credit, you will not get depreciation on that GST element. But if you are not going to claim the credit of that GST because it is covered under block credit concept, then that becomes your cost. On that GST also you will be claiming depreciation. Third point is also there. Let's say I have purchased one asset today. I have taken a loan today to purchase the asset. I have purchased the asset after 5 months. Then whatever is the interest up to the period on which asset is put to use, that interest on loan, as per accounting standard also, what we do, it is to be capitalized and it will be depreciated then onwards. Whatever interest on loan I will be paying after the asset is put to use, that you can't capitalize, that you have to directly debit to the P&L under section 36, that we'll see later on. Last point of depreciation, unabsorbed depreciation. Let's say I have PGBP income of 100 rupees before claiming depreciation under section 32. But my depreciation under section 32 is coming to 150 rupees. Can I absorb fully 150 rupees? No. There will be negative figure of 50 rupees. This negative 50 rupees is actually because of depreciation and that's why that negative 50 is called as unabsorbed depreciation, because this loss is arising just because of depreciation. This unabsorbed depreciation you can claim against any other head except salary. And let's say there is no other head of income or any other head of income is lower than unabsorbed depreciation. Then whatever is the balance you can carry forward to the future years and you can deduct in the next years. How many years you can carry forward the same? N number of years without the life. N number of years. Now in the next year, which thing you will deduct first? Remember, always at your home also, what you eat first? The food which is prepared today. Then you eat the food which belongs to yesterday, but we eat the food first which will get, perish first. Which is perishable will eat first. Which is non-perishable, which can be in the fridge for some more days, will eat then onwards if still we have the hunger. That means, first of all, current year depreciation to be deducted from the PGBP income. That is the current year expense. If still your PGBP income is there, you please deduct brought forward business loss because it has only the life of 8 years. If still you have sufficient PGBP income, then deduct unabsorbed depreciation at the end. One more point and the last point in section 32. any depreciable asset for which 100% deduction is allowed under any of this section, like section 35, like section 35 AD, then you don't need depreciation, because that 100% is allowed as a deduction. What you want more? So if depreciation on any asset is fully allowed as a deduction, then no depreciation will be claimed. Are you understanding this, people? Yes or no? So that was a very important section, section 32, depreciation. Now friends, after section 32, let us move on to the very next section, and that is section 35, expenditure on scientific research. There are two kinds of expenditure that you can do. Number one, you have your business, you get an approved plan of scientific research from the government, and you do any in-house research, current year expenditure or prior year expenditure, whatever, you will get deduction. Number two, you don't have any business, or you have the business, but you are doing the donation for scientific research to some other organization. You will get deduction for that donation also. Number one, if you have in-house research, you are any kind of assessee, individual, HUF, AOP, BOI, AJP, company, any kind of assessee, you are doing the research for your own business, then you see whether you are doing current year expense or prior period expense. If it is a current year expense, then whether it is revenue or capital, capital except land. On land you will get no deduction. Rest every other expense you will get 100% deduction. Even the capital asset you are getting 100% deduction. But if you have any prior period expense before starting the business, preliminary expense, then whatever expenditure you have done maximum up to 3 years prior to starting of the business. Means if I have started the business on 1st April 20, then any expenditure from 1st April 17 to 31st March 20, it will be allowed as a deduction. But from that, you see which kind of expense you are doing, revenue or capital. If it is revenue kind of nature of expenditure, please first get it approved by income tax authority. And only two type of expenditure you can get deduction of. Number one, salary to personnel who is doing research except perquisite. And number two, the material which is used for scientific research. No other prior period revenue expense allowed. But if it is capital expenditure, except land, you will get every kind of deduction, but it is not required to be approved. And what you will get is 100% deduction. Once you are claiming this deduction, can you claim depreciation again? Obviously, no. But let's say you are not having your any kind of business, you are giving donation for certain research, which can be scientific research, which can be social activity research, statistical research, you will get deduction. If you are following 115 BAC, you will not get deduction for the donation, otherwise you will get. Now, if you are giving donation to any university, college or any association, either scientific research or social research, statistical research, you will get 100% deduction. But if you are giving donation for National Laboratory, IIT University, National Laboratory or IIT University, and only for scientific research you are giving the donation, you will get 100% deduction. If you are giving donation to a company which is registered in India, whose main object is to do scientific research, you are giving donation to that kind of company, and if it is in the nature of scientific research, again you will get 100% deduction. What if my PGBP income before this section 35 wala deduction is 100, my deduction under section 35 is 120, balance 20 will be called as unabsorbed scientific research expenditure, which is having the same treatment as it was of unabsorbed depreciation. So that was section 35. Now section 35 AD. If you are engaged into some specified business, the name of which are mentioned below, the nature of the business is mentioned here, and if that business was started after the date which I have mentioned over here, if you have started the business after this date and your business is of a particular nature, 100% of your current year and prior period expend, whether revenue or capital, you will get as a deduction. Now all the nature of business I am not reading aloud. What is given in the bold, which is important for the exam: operating cold chain facility, warehousing of agricultural produce, warehousing of sugar produce, hospital who's having 100+ beds, most required things in today's era, hotel which is having 2-star plus rating. All these kind of businesses are called as specified business, for which you will get deduction under 35 AD. One more is also there, operating infrastructure facility like making the roads, making the bridge, etc. How much deduction you will get? If you are in current year, then 100% of your revenue and capital expense. And for any kind of prior year expense, no limit on number of years, the revenue and capital expense. Prior year capital expense deduction you will get only if the expense is capitalized in the books of account. If it is not there in the books, you can't get the deduction. But certain kind of expenditure you cannot claim as a deduction. Number one, the expenditure done to purchase the land, to purchase the goodwill, or to purchase any other financial instrument, or any kind of expense which you have done in excess of rupees 10,000 otherwise than by account pay check, account pay draft, ECS or other electronic mode, for which the payment is done to a single person in a single day, that expense also you can't claim deduction of section 35 AD. Remember, to claim 35 AD is not compulsory, it is optional. If you don't want to claim 35 AD, rather you want to claim a normal deduction of 32, you claim it. But if you are claiming section 35 AD, you can't claim section 32 depreciation for the same asset. If you are following section 115 BAC, you cannot claim 35 AD. If the asset on which you have claimed section 35 AD deduction, you sell it later on, whatever is the sale value, it will be totally PGBP income as per section 28. One more point which again we'll learn in set of carry forward chapter, but still, if you have a specified business and you are having a non-specified business, for example, I'm having a hotel 2-star plus, I'm having another hospital only 50 beds. Can I say this hotel 2-star plus is a specified business, but this is a non-specified business because less than 100 beds? Let's say in specified business it is a loss. After claiming section 35 AD, there is a loss of rupees 100. And here in non-specified business, there is a income of let's say rupees 150. Remember, section 35 AD is a egoistic section. The loss cannot be deducted against other non-specified business. So this 100 rupee of loss I cannot set off against this 150 rupees of income. Compulsory I have to carry forward this 100 rupees of loss. But instead if there would have been the hospital of 150 beds, even though in that hospital I am not claiming 35 AD, still the nature of the business is specified, I could have set off the loss. So the loss of a specified business can be set off only against the another specified business, even though that business is not claiming section 35 AD deduction, either because it is an option or because it was started prior to the date which is mentioned. Still I can set off the loss. If balance any loss is there, it will be carry forwarded for infinite period, which in future also I can set off only against a specified business. One more point. The asset which you have purchased for your specified business, on which you have claimed deduction of section 35 AD, remember, you have to use it compulsorily for specified business. If before 8 years of the purchase, you are transferring the same to your another non-specified business, you are doing a violation. So, the year in which you purchase the asset compulsorily up to 8 years, you have to use for your specified business. If you are transferring it to any non-specified business in any of these 8 years, the year in which you transferred the asset, whatever deduction you have claimed earlier under section 35 AD, it will be added back to your income. So let's say in the year 1819 I have purchased some building for rupees 100, claim 35 AD deduction. Now in the year 2021 I transferred the same to any non-specified business. Can I say before 8 years I transferred, so I did a contravention? 100 rupees of deduction will be the income of the year 2021, but not fully 100. See, for the year 1819 and 1920 you would have not claimed the depreciation, na? So now allow it, notional deduction. So how much would have been the depreciation for 1819 and 1920? Can I say 100 into 10% and 90 into 10% because WDV method. Total 19 rupees would have been the depreciation of this 2 years. Deduct it from 100 rupees. What is the notional value as on the beginning of 2021? 100 minus 19, that is 81 rupees. Only 81 rupees will be added to the income in this year. Means if you are adding the 35 AD deduction, you can get the depreciation benefit also against that. So it is a good thing. Balance will be your definitely deemed income. Then 3 to 4 very small sections are there. Again, I'm saying this only that much points which are important for the last day, only that much will be covered. And it is my guarantee 90% of the things will be from this only. If you are making any contribution for rural development, for section 35 CCA, you will get 100% deduction. Remember, for the person who is not having PGBP income, if they made the donation for rural development under 80 GGA, they will get 100% deduction. For PGBP person, 80 GGA don't apply because they get 35 CCA. Similarly, if you are giving any contribution for your agricultural extension project and you are doing any expenditure, you will get 100% of the capital and revenue expense as a deduction. If you are a company and you are doing any skill development project, you will get 100% deduction for that also. However, this deduction is applicable only to a company, not to any other person. And for a company also, land and building will not get as a deduction. For building, depreciation will be allowed. For land, nothing will be allowed. Section 35 DDA, what it says, if you are a company, you are an employer, you are giving voluntary retirement scheme to any of your employee, in one single year, you can't claim deduction of that VRS expense. You will get deduction in 5 equal annual installment from the year in which you gave it. So if 2021 I gave VRS of 10 lakh, in this year I will get only 2 lakh rupees of deduction. Balance 2 lakh in subsequent year, balance in 10 year. Means in total 5 years I will get deduction of 10 lakhs equally. Now there is a list of some other deduction which is also important, section 36. Some of the deductions also only I have covered. Number 1, insurance premium on health of employee. If you are a person who is employer, you are taking insurance of your employee, you are paying premium on that, you will get deduction of that premium, provided you should pay otherwise than by cash. If you are paying through cash, you will get no deduction, and that insurer should be approved by Insurance Regulatory Development Authority, that is IRDA. Second, whenever paying bonus or commission to any employee, remember you will get the deduction of that only if it is not as a profit distribution, it is not as a dividend. So let's say a company wants to give dividend to its employee who is also a shareholder. If company will give dividend, no deduction from profit. So company is showing in the books that I am paying bonus or commission. Arey, you are paying your profit distribution in the name of bonus or commission. You will not get any deduction. Otherwise you will get it. But otherwise also you will get only if the payment is done up to the due date of filing return of income. It is covered under 43B. I will again cover this point in 43B, that you will get deduction of this expense only if the expense is actually paid to employee prior to the due date of 139 subsection 1. Then interest on borrowed capital. You took any loan from friend, relative or any kind of bank institution, NBFC, for the business purpose, and you are using that borrowed money for your business, whatever interest is accrued, you will get deduction of that. Remember, if you are a proprietor and in your P&L you are writing interest on my own capital, that is your personal expenditure, it is not borrowed capital, you will get no deduction. If interest is payable to a bank or public financial institution, then deduction you will get only if it is paid up to the due date of filing return of income under section 43B. Another thing that I was discussed earlier also, if you took a loan to purchase any capital asset, whatever is the interest up to the date on which you have put to use the asset, up to that date, deduction of interest will not be allowed because it is to be capitalized. After the asset is put to use, whatever interest you will pay on that loan, that will be allowed as a deduction. Then employer contribution to recognized provident fund, approved gratuity fund, superannuation fund. In salary chapter we saw employer also contribute in all this kind of fund. It will be allowed as a deduction to employer, but payment should be made before the due date of filing return of income under 139 subsection 1. Similarly, employer also contribute for the pension scheme that is mentioned under section 80 CCD, Atal Pension Yojana, National Pension Scheme. For that, employer will also get the contribution, but the maximum contribution deduction that employer will get is 10% of the salary of employee. And here what is the meaning of salary? Basic plus DA percentage, nothing else. So let's say salary of employee is 100 lakhs. Employer contributing 12 lakh. Deduction employer will get only 10 lakh rupees, which is 10% of the salary. Excess 2 lakh disallowed to the employer. One more point is there over here which I have not covered in the notes. Employee contribution. It is not the income of employer, right? But to deposit employee contribution into that particular fund is the liability of employer. But if employer do not pay such employee contribution before the due date of that act, if I'm talking about PF, then PF due date, then whatever contribution employer has deposited after the due date of that act, it will be added to the income of employer as a punishment. So if employee contribution to provident fund, superannuation fund, etc., employer deposit to the government after the due date of that particular act, then it will be added to the income of employer. Remember this. Then bad debt. If incidental to business you have any bad debt, and if you have written off the bad debt in your books of account, you can take deduction of that bad debt in your books also. But remember, you will get no deduction for bad debt provision or reserve for bad debt. You will get no deduction for this kind of provisions. You will get deduction only for the bad debt, actual bad debt. Then expense on family planning of employee. If you are a company, you are doing any expenditure for family planning of employee. If it is a revenue expenditure, it is fully allowed. If it is capital expenditure over a tenure of 5 years, you will get deduction, not depreciation. If it is unabsorbed expenditure, same like unabsorbed depreciation. Point to be noted, this expense is deductible only by a company. In recent July 21 exam, they have asked this, family planning expense. But it was not done by a company, it was done by a proprietor. And that's why this kind of expense is not deductible to any other person. The deduction is only available if you are a company. The last point. If you are a person who is doing trading in shares, securities, commodities, then for you, it is not a capital gain income, it is your business income. Dealing in shares is your business income. Dealing in commodity is your business income. Then you must be paying in a recognized stock exchange a particular tax which is called as security transaction tax, STT, commodity transaction tax, CTT. If dealing in the shares and security is your business, it is your PGBP income. You are paying security transaction tax or commodity transaction tax. That expenditure you can take as a deduction while calculating your PGBP income. Remember, if you are an investor and it is your capital gain income, in capital gain you cannot claim STT as a deduction, but if it is your PGBP income, you can get deduction of STT. In the deduction point, the last point, section 37 subsection 1. Any other deduction which is not covered in any of this following section which we have done up to now, if it is related to your business, it is not a capital expenditure, it is not a personal expenditure, then you will get deduction under section 37 subsection 1. Purchase expense, manufacturing expense, salary expense, postage expense, courier expense, stationery expense, stipend paid to articles by a CA firm, any kind of this expenditure are business expense. It is the expenditure of the current previous year. It is not a capital expense, it is not a personal nature expense, then deduction will be available under section 37 subsection 1. But there are two exceptions which are mentioned under explanation to section 37. Explanation number 1. If you are paying penalty for any offense under any of this act, traffic memo you paid for violating the signal, GST late fee you paid, that every kind of penalty, it is not allowed as a deduction. Remember, if in GST you are paying interest, interest is allowed as a deduction. It is not a penalty. But late fee, penalty, it is always not allowed as a deduction. Second, any CSR expenditure as per section 135 of Companies Act, corporate social responsibility by certain companies, etc. That CSR expenditure actually is a profit appropriation, it is not your expenditure, and as per explanation 2, you will not get deduction of that also. Are you understanding this, people? Yes or no? So up to now what we studied is which deductions are allowed to you as a deduction. If already debited to P&L, do nothing. If not debited to P&L, deduct separately. Now we'll start learning which kind of expenditure is disallowed, which is not to be deducted from net profit. So now let us start understanding which are the expenditure which is not allowed as a deduction, which is disallowed. Let me be very much clear. If this kind of expenditure are debited to P&L, then while computing the PGBP income, you have to add back. But if this kind of expenditure is not debited to P&L, kindly ignore that. It is already not deducted. You will not add back it again. Now the very first kind of disallowance, section 37 clause 2b. If any political party is coming to you that please give us the fund, we'll print your name in our brochure, pamphlet, etc. It will be like your advertisement. So what you are actually paying to them? You are paying to them advertisement expense. Any advertisement expense paid to political party for printing your name in souvenir, brochure, pamphlet, etc. it is never allowed as a deduction, it will be disallowed. The reason is, for this you are getting deduction always in 80 GGB, 80 GGC kind of section in deduction chapter. So what you have to do, if in your P&L any advertisement expense of political party or donation to political party is there, first while computing PGBP income, add back, disallow. After gross total income, take the deduction again for 80 GGB, 80 GGC. But in this two section, deduction is allowed only if you have paid otherwise than by cash. Otherwise, deduction is not allowed. Then section 38. When you building, plant, machinery, furniture is not wholly used for business. Let's say for my property, 50% used for residence, 50% for business. So whatever is the expenditure of this premise, whatever is the expenditure of this asset, only 50% will be deductible in PGBP. Balance will not be deductible. Then section 40 clause A subclause 1 read with 40 clause A subclause 3, a very important section. You know what is TDS, you have studied already as this is the revision lecture. You know one point that whenever you are paying certain amount to certain persons, then in many section you can deduct TDS. 194A for interest, 194C for contract, 194H for brokerage, 194J for professional fee, 194I for rental payment, 192 for salary, blah blah blah. And if you are a person who is required to deduct TDS, it is your liability, it is your responsibility, it is your duty to deduct that TDS. If you don't deduct TDS, or after deducting the TDS, you did not deposit to the government up to the due date of filing return of income, it is your crime, and for that you will be punished. So if you don't deduct TDS on the amount on which you was supposed to deduct, or after deducting the TDS you did not deposit the same to the government up to the filing return due date, then if the amount is paid to a non-resident, 100% of that expense will be disallowed. And if that amount was paid to a resident payee, 30% will be disallowed. What I said, you don't deduct TDS, or after deducting TDS, you didn't deposit to the government up to the due date. And if the amount is paid to a non-resident, how much will be disallowed? 100%. If the amount is paid to a resident, then how much will be disallowed? 30%. Now this 100% and 30% will be allowed in that year in which you rectify your mistake. That means in the year in which TDS deducted and deposited correctly. In that year you will get back deduction of this amount which was disallowed earlier. So that is 40 clause A subclause 1A. Remember, the above point was for non-resident in which 100% is to be disallowed. This one point is for resident in which only 30% will be disallowed. The remaining provision is same. Then 40 clause A subclause 2. If you pay any tax on your profit, it will be disallowed. Meaning thereby, whenever you are debiting any items called as income tax, TDS, direct tax, advance tax, TCS, it is all related to income tax, which is tax on your profit. You will get no deduction for that while computing PGBP income. But if it is indirect tax like GST, customs, etc., you will get the deduction. So what a chart I have prepared over here, you see what you are paying, what is debited to P&L, direct tax or indirect tax. If it is direct tax, total 3 things can be there. You must have paid either the tax or interest or penalty. Tax and interest disallowed under 40A subclause 2. Penalty disallowed as per explanation 1 of section 37 subsection 1. If it is indirect tax, you are paying tax or interest, it is a valid deduction under 37 subsection 1. But if it is a penalty, it is to be disallowed as per explanation 1 of 37 subsection 1. One more point. Whenever you are getting income tax refund, because your excess TDS was deducted, you have paid excess advance tax. Today you are getting income tax refund. That income tax refund is not an income, so it won't be added to your income. But interest on income tax refund, it is taxable under the head IFOS. Are you understanding this, people? Yes or no? Then, two very important disallowances that you have to remember. 40A subsection 2, 40A subsection 3. Starting with 40A subsection 2, which says that any payment made to a relative, if it is in excess of fair market value, whatever is the expenditure over and above market value, that is to be disallowed. For example, in my P&L, I have paid commission to my brother 20,000. And as per the market rate, I should have paid only 15,000. How much extra deduction I have claimed? 5,000. That 5,000 will be disallowed under 40A subsection 2. Under 40A subsection 2, that 5,000 will be disallowed. Now here, who is called as relative? Relative will be spouse, brother, sister, lineal ascendant, lineal descendant. Dependent or independent, both. Lineal ascendant means parents, grandparents. Descendant, son, child, grandchild, etc. So spouse, brother, sister, lineal ascendant, lineal descendant. Remember, here other persons like uncle, sister-in-laws, grandparents, etc. are not covered. Sorry, grandparents are still covered. Uncle, sister-in-laws, friends are never covered. In July 21 exam, they have given one adjustment. You have paid certain expense to sister-in-law, which is in excess of market value. The adjustment was to be completely ignored because sister-in-law is not a relative. 40A subsection 2 never gets applicable. It is only applicable if the payment is done to a relative. Then 40A subsection 3, which says that whenever you are making any payment which is in excess of rupees 10,000, payment is done on a single day to a single person, otherwise than by account pay check, account pay draft, electronic clearing system or other electronic mode, that entire payment is to be disallowed. If the payment is done to a transport operator who is plying, hiring, leasing of goods carriage, then the limit of 10,000 will be replaced with limit of 35,000. This was also asked in July 21 exam, wherein for transport operator they have given in cash 12,000 or 11,000. Remember, for transport operator the limit is 35,000. Up to 35,000 you can pay. Over that you can't pay. For every other person the limit will be 10,000. Let's say in some earlier years, let's say in 1920 I have claimed one of the expenditure. For how much amount? 15,000. On accrual basis. Payment I haven't done, it got accrued, so I claimed the deduction. Now in the year 2021, I paid that 15,000 to the creditor in cash. Can I say I violated 40A3? But now I can't disallow that expense because it is not debited to P&L. It was debited in the earlier year. So now what to do? Now government said, whatever deduction you have claimed in 1920, please add into your income as a deemed income. So if you have claimed deduction in any earlier year for which you are making the payment in this year, which is in contravention of 40A3, then whatever payment you are doing in contravention, it will be treated as the income of current previous year. The word you will not use disallowed, the word you will use added to the income. But there are certain cases for which even though you are making the payment in excess of 10,000 by cash, cross check, bearer check, etc., still it won't get disallowed. And these are called as Rule 6DD. What is called as Rule 6DD? Certain payment for which 40A3 will not apply. If you are making any payment to RBI or a banking company or LIC or government, you can make payment through any mode for any amount, no issue. If you are making payment for purchase of agricultural produce, forest produce, fishery produce, directly to the cultivator, directly to the grower, directly to the farmer or producer, then also you can make the payment through any mode because they might not have any bank account to deposit your check, etc. If you are making payment for purchasing agricultural produce to some trader, not to the farmer, then 40A3 will be applicable because trader, broker, middleman has to have the bank account. Then let's say if you are making payment of a salary after deducting TDS under 192 to any of your employee who has temporarily posted at some other place temporarily for 15 or more days, then but naturally he will not open any account at that place for those temporary period. He don't have any account, let's say, in that place. You can pay salary to that employee in any mode for that period. It is totally okay. 40A3 will not apply. There are so many other points also in 40A3, like you are making payment in a city or a town which no bank is there, or you are making a payment to a cottage industry who is working without aid of power supply, or you are making payment at the time of employee retirement and up to 50,000, 40A3 will not apply. This kind of things are there. I have not covered because it is not that important. One more point, even if you are making payment on bank holiday, 15th August, 26th January, like that, still 40A3 will be attracted, amount will be disallowed if contravention is done. Even though bank holiday is there, because electronic mode is allowed, na? Bank holiday is there. Make the payment through electronic mode. Who said no? Then 40A subsection 9, which says that whenever employer is contributing to any recognized fund, it is allowed as a deduction. If contribution is done to any unrecognized fund or non-statutory welfare fund, he will get no deduction. Then section 41, deemed income, which says that, see, many points I have already covered, like balancing charge I have covered. One point which is important, 41 subsection 4, bad debt recovery. Whenever you have any bad debt, and in this year you are doing recovery of that bad debt, up to the amount of which deduction was allowed earlier, it will be taxable as your PGBP income. Let's say 2 years back I had the bad debt of 5 lakh. Government has allowed me the deduction only of rupees 3 lakh. Can I say 2 lakh was disallowed? Now today let's say I am doing recovery of rupees 3 lakh. Then you first see how much was disallowed last year. 2 lakh was not allowed as a deduction. Assume from this 3 lakh, first you are getting this 2 lakh, which was not allowed as a deduction. Then from this 3 lakh, that 2 lakh will not be taxable also, because you have not claimed any deduction earlier. Balance rupees 1 lakh, for which you have got the deduction, that 1 lakh rupees will be taxable as your bad debt recovery. So whatever recovery is done, find out how much allowed was not allowed as a deduction earlier, that will not be taxable. Balance for which deduction was allowed, that will be taxable as bad debt recovery. Are you understanding this or not? So that was section 41. Now let us move to the very next section, and that is section 43B. Now the references which we have seen already at 1 or 2 places. What is section 43B? There are certain deductions for which you will get the deduction only if it is actually paid up to the due date of filing return of income under section 139(1) of the previous year. Now see, if you are following cash system of accounting, each and every deduction is allowed only when it is actually paid. So there is no problem. 43B do not get covered only because it becomes redundant over there. 43B is attracted only when you are following accrual system, wherein generally you get deduction as and when it is accrued and not when paid. But there are few deductions, few expenditures. Even though you are following accrual system, payment has to be made up to the due date of 139 subsection 1. The very first point, sum payable as tax, duty, cess or fee under any law. For example, GST, custom, etc., municipal tax, compulsory pay up to the due date of filing return, then only you will get deduction. Sum payable by way of employer contribution to provident fund, superannuation fund, gratuity fund, pay up to the due date of filing return. Remember, employer contribution up to the due date of 139(1) you have to pay. Employee contribution, due date of that act. Then bonus or commission to employee, pay up to 139(1). Interest payable to bank, public finance institution, state finance corporation, NBFC. Remember, if you pay interest to friend or relative, even though you not pay up to 10 years, 20 years, still you will get deduction. But when interest is payable to bank, PFI, etc., compulsory you will get deduction if it is actually paid up to 139(1). Then leave salary payable to employee, 139(1). Any sum which you require to pay to railways, Indian Railway, like for transportation of goods you need to pay the rent, etc., 139(1) applicable. As I have already said, it is applicable only if you follow mercantile system, because in cash system it becomes redundant. Now the expenditure which is disallowed in this year because you haven't paid it. Now let's say in any subsequent year you make the payment, then in the year in which you are making the payment, in that year it will be allowed as a deduction. So this will be allowed in the year in which it is paid. Last, any unpaid interest, if it is converted into a loan by bank or financial institution under any restructuring, please don't assume that you have paid that. For example, I have unpaid interest of rupees 1 crore. Now let's say bank under restructuring plan converted this as a loan. So I can't say that I have paid the interest, take the deduction of 1 crore. No. Whenever in future you will pay EMI of this loan, for that EMI, you can say that I have paid interest up to that EMI. So in the year in which you are paying the EMI, let's say in the 2021 I have paid 10 lakh rupees of EMI, then indirectly I am paying interest of rupees 10 lakh to the bank. I will get deduction only of 10 lakh, not of entire 1 crore. Now one special provision is there which is only applicable if you are a partnership firm or limited liability partnership, which is mentioned under section 40 clause B. See, a partnership firm, it pays generally 3 things to partner: profit, remuneration, interest. Sir, commission, bonus, that all is called as remuneration only for income tax purpose. Now profit, it is not expenditure for partnership firm, it is appropriation, so no deduction for profit. Okay. What other 2 things firm is paying? Remuneration and interest. For that, partnership firm will get the deduction. But remember, deduction not up to whatever you want, deduction only up to the amount which is maximum permissible amount. Now what is maximum permissible amount? For remuneration, number 1, you will get the deduction only if it is paid to a working partner as per the partnership deed, and it should be paid up to maximum permissible limit. Now this limit is mentioned under 40 clause B and it depends on book profit. Now what is book profit? Book profit is basically the PGBP income. It is basically the PGBP income. PGBP income before deducting remuneration. So the formula of book profit is net profit as per P&L plus or minus every adjustment from 28 to 44 dB. Even you deduct interest to partner also. And if you have already debited remuneration to partner in your profit and loss account, please add back, because we want our PGBP income before deducting remuneration. That will be called as book profit. Now, up to the amount of 3 lakh rupees of book profit, 90% of book profit you can pay as a remuneration, or 1,50,000, whichever is higher. So if I have book profit of 1 lakh, I can deduct remuneration of 1,50,000. If I have book profit of 2 lakh, I can deduct remuneration up to 1,80,000, that is 90% of that book profit. Now whatever is the book profit over and above rupees 3 lakh, of that balance amount, 60% can be allowed. So let's say 5 lakh rupees is my book profit. What is the remuneration I can pay to my partner maximum? Can I say on balance 2 lakh 60% plus 2 lakh 70,000, that is 90% of 3 lakh, total 3 lakh 90,000. Now let's say firm is paying only 3 lakh, then you will get deduction of 3 lakh. If firm is paying 4 lakh to the partner, you will get deduction for 3 lakh 90,000. Here, while calculating the book profit, please don't deduct any brought forward loss or carry forwarded loss, because it is covered under 72-73. But unabsorbed depre is covered under section 32, so you have to definitely deduct unabsorbed depreciation while calculating book profit for remuneration purpose. Now, how much interest to partner is allowed as a deduction? Even if it is on loan, even if it is on capital, maximum up at the rate of 12% per annum. So if a firm is paying 15% interest to the partner, deduction will be available only up to 12%. Now remember, while calculating the question, first deduct interest up to 12%, then see what is the book profit. On that book profit you apply remuneration. So first interest to be given effect of, and then remuneration. Now those remuneration and interest which are deductible to the partnership firm, only that much will become taxable income for the partner. So let's say a partnership firm paying remuneration of 4 lakh to the partner, and partnership firm is getting, let's say, only 3 lakh rupees of deduction, 1 lakh is disallowed, then for a partner 4 lakh fully will not be taxable, only 3 lakh rupees will be taxable, for which already deduction was claimed by partnership firm. Similar goes with the interest deduction also. Now some other administrative sections we have to start with. In that very first, section 44AA, maintenance of books of accounts. Now when a person is required to maintain books of accounts, that we are going to learn in this section 44AA. See, I have prepared 2 charts which will be very easy for you to understand. For books of accounts, there are basically two categories. Number one, specified profession. Number two, other than that, all other businessmen, all non-specified profession. If you are covered under specified profession, that is legal, medical, engineering, architect, accounting, technical service, film artist, company secretary, IT professional, high dignity professional, specified profession. You see, what was your gross receipt in last 3 years? What was your gross receipt in last 3 years? So if I want to maintain books of account and the question arises, how much books are to be maintained? See, I'm searching for 2021. So what are the last 3 years? 1920, 18, 19, 17, 18. See what is the gross receipt in that. Let's say here 1 lakh, here 2 lakh, here 3 lakh. Can I say in one of the year also, it has not exceeded 1.5 lakh? See, even though in rest of the 2 year it exceeded, but in one of the year also it did not exceed 1.5 lakh. Then you are supposed to maintain only those books of accounts from which assessing officer can calculate your income. Like only bank statement is enough, or only your sales invoices are enough, that's it. There is no specific criteria that this much things to be maintained, no. But if let's say here instead of 1 lakh it was 3 lakh. So can I say my gross receipt exceeded 1.5 lakh in all the 3 last year? So I have to maintain books of account which is as per rule 6F. Now what specific books I have to maintain compulsorily as per rule 6F? Cash book, journal register, ledger. Journal to be maintained only if you are following mercantile system. Copy of bills and receipt for which amount is more than 25, those bills only. Original expense voucher for which expenditure is more than 50. And if you are from medical, additional requirement will be to maintain the stock register in rule 3C along with daily case register. So daily case register in form 3C and stock inventory, those things are also to be maintained along with all other things which we discussed. So here books of accounts are to be maintained if you are a specified profession. What if you are a non-specified profession, you are a businessman? Then we have to check basically two things, not only one thing, we have to check two things. Number one, we have to check PGBP income. Second, we have to check what is the gross total turnover or sales receipt. See, in specified profession, we were checking only gross receipt, not PGBP income. Here we have to check PGBP income also, gross receipt also. For all the past 3 years, we have to check. So past 3 years means for us 1920, 18, 19, 17, 18. What I have to check? Two things, PGBP income also, turnover also. What they said, if in last 3 years, your PGBP income was not more than 1.2 lakh and your turnover was not more than 10 lakh, in all the 3 years, it was not more than the limit. Let's say in 17-18, my PGBP income was 1 lakh, here 90,000, here 80,000. My turnover 5 lakh, 4 lakh, 8 lakh. Can I say in all the 3 years PGBP income is less than 1 lakh 20,000 and turnover is less than 10 lakh? Don't maintain books of account itself. You are not required to maintain books of accounts. But if any one of the thing exceed the limit, here let's say 1.90 lakh, turnover is not more than 10 lakh, but in one of the year also PGBP income exceed 1.2 lakh, then I have to maintain books of account, but only those books of account are to be maintained from which assessing officer can determine my income. No specific criteria. If you are individual and HUF, then instead of 1.2 lakh, you have to see 2.5 lakh of PGBP income, and instead of 10 lakh of turnover, you have to see 25 lakh rupees of turnover if you are individual and HUF. For all the remaining persons, 1.2 lakh and 10 lakh will be the answer. Now, one more category is there who are compulsorily required to maintain books of accounts. Please understand carefully from which another topics will be covered. There are 3 sections: 44 AD, 44 ADA, 44 AE. 44 AD, presumptive taxation for a businessman. 44 ADA, presumptive income for a professional. 44 AE, presumptive income for a person who is engaged into transportation of hiring, leasing, plying, hiring, leasing of goods carriage. Now, instead of following any provision of the PGBP, what they can do, if they are covered under those 3 sections, then They just directly need to apply the percentage of their turnover which is given in that section. For example, 44 AD says 8% of the turnover will be deemed PGBP income. Let's say I have turnover of 1 crore, then I have to directly show 8 lakh rupees of my PGBP income. That's it. That's it. I don't have to apply any PGBP provision, and this is will call my PGBP income. But let's say I want to show only 3 lakh rupees of PGBP income. Government said you want to declare lower than what we have said to you. Then you have to conduct audit, and for that you have to compulsory maintain books of accounts. So if any person who is covered under that presumptive income, if they show income lower than prescribed under those 3 sections, they also have to maintain books of accounts. Are you understanding this, people? Yes or no? So that was section 44AA, books of accounts. Now, when a person is required to conduct audit of books of accounts, 44AB. Here also I will explain the whole section through a chart which is very important to you for understanding purpose, and the chart will help you a lot. You see, whether you are a person who is covered under presumptive taxation or you are not covered. Who will not be covered, that will see, like company generally in some of the section not covered, non-resident in some of the section not covered, person having higher turnover generally not covered. So either you can be covered or you cannot be covered. If you are covered under this 3 section, then you see whether you are declaring minimum income as laid down in those section. If yes, audit is not required. If you are declaring lower income than those percentage which are declared in those 3 sections, then audit is compulsory. Audit is compulsory only if your total income is more than basic exemption limit. If it is less than basic exemption limit, no audit is required. But if you are followed under 44AE and you are declaring lower income than what minimum required, compulsory audit will be applicable even though your total income is less than basic exemption limit. Still audit will be applicable. But if you are not covered under presumptive taxation itself, that those sections are not applicable to you, then when audit is to be done? You see whether you are a business person or you are a professional. If you are a business person and your turnover during the year is more than 1 crore, audit is applicable. And if you are a profession and your gross receipt is more than 50 lakh, audit is applicable. For businessmen, 1 crore is the limit. For professional, 50 lakh is the limit. Now, there is one amendment from your attempt. Instead of this 1 crore, the limit is now 5 crore. Means up to the turnover of 5 crore, there will be no audit. Then sir, directly write 5 crore. Why you have written 1 crore in the chart? Because the limit of 5 crore will be applicable only if 2 conditions are simultaneously fulfilled. Condition number 1, whatever is your total receipt from sales, from other income, etc. The total receipt from that, cash receipt should not be more than 5%. It should be less than or equal to total receipt. Means receipt in cash should be less than or equal to 5% of the total receipt, and payment in cash for any expenditure, purchase, etc. should be less than or equal to 5% of the total payment. Means your banking transaction should be more than or equal to 95% and your cash transaction should be less than or equal to 5%. Then only the audit limit will be 5 crore. If any one of the condition also not satisfied, then the limit of turnover will be 1 crore. Above 1 crore, audit will be compulsory. See, there will be no change in the limit for professionals. For them, still it is 50 lakh. This 5 crore will be enhanced only for a business person. Now, up to which date the auditor has to submit the audit report? Before 1 month prior to the due date of filing return of income. For an audited person, the due date of filing return of income comes to 31st October of the assessment year. So, audit report submission date will become 30th September of the assessment year, 1 month prior to the due date of filing return of income. Now, let us go to the very first presumptive section, and that is section 44 AD. Profit or gain on presumptive basis. Now, understand, those resident individual, HUF and a firm, means LLP here not covered, company, AOP, BOI, AJP not covered. If you are resident individual, resident HUF, resident partnership firm which is not LLP, you are carrying on any kind of business and your turnover is less than or equal to 2 crore, you need not to apply the entire provision of the PGBP chapter. You just show the minimum percentage which we are saying on your turnover, you will get your PGBP income. But provided you should not have claimed deduction of 10AA or any deduction which is mentioned under heading C. You are not into the business of plying, hiring, leasing of goods carriage, because for them another section 44AE is there. So who will be called as non-eligible? A resident company, LLP, AOP, BOE, etc. Any non-resident, turnover more than 2 crore, professionals, 44AE wale persons, broker, or a person who is having agency business, they can't claim 44AD. If you are an eligible person of 44AD, then how much percentage of your turnover should be PGBP income? The answer is 8%. But a concession for banking channel, if you are a person who is receiving the turnover through account pay check, account pay draft, ECS or other electronic mode, instead of 8%, you can apply 6% and that will be your PGBP income. Provided this amount you must have received up to the due date of filing return of income of 139 subsection 1. If you have received after the due date of 139(1), even though through banking channel, you have to apply 8%. So whatever you have received up to the due date of filing return of income through banking channel, apply 6%, otherwise 8%. Once you are claiming this presumptive section, from that you can't claim any other deduction, you can't claim remuneration or interest to partner further, even you can't have any disallowances also. Whatever is this, it will be final PGBP income. But you are not claiming depreciation also, but it is compulsory. Means from your block it will be reduced. You will not get deduction separately. So the WDV of block will be calculated as if depreciation was allowed. If you are following presumptive taxation, no need to maintain books of account, no need to carry out any audit. If you are following 44AD, then advance tax need not to pay in 4 installment. You have to pay only in 1 installment up to 15th March. There is a concession. However, if you started following 44AD, then in the year in which you followed the same, after that up to 5 years compulsory you have to follow 44AD. If in any of that 5 years you show lower income than the minimum prescribed income, the section will get hurt. Means in that year you have to maintain books, you have to get yourself audited, plus after that for 5 years the doors of 44AD will be closed for you. You can't opt for presumptive taxation, meaning thereby, let's say in the year 1920 I started following presumptive income. So from 2021, 21-22, 22-23, 23-24 and last 24-25, for this 5 years I have to show 44AD, I have to follow 44AD. Let's say in the year 24-25 I shown lower income. So in that year books to be maintained, audit to be done. But after that for 5 years, that is 25, 26, 27, 28, 29 and 29, 23 up to this year, you cannot apply 44AD. You have to be in the normal provision, you have to follow the normal provision of this act. Acha, audit is to be done only if your total income is more than basic exemption limit. So we can also say that if the last year 44AD was followed, then in this year it is compulsory. If in the last year 44AD is not followed, then in this year it is optional. If in last year 44AD is followed, then in this year you have to compulsory follow 44AD, otherwise audit is to be done. The very similar section is 44ADA, but it is for a person who is resident. It may be any person who is resident and having a specified profession which is mentioned under 44AA. If your gross receipt during the previous year is less than or equal to 50 lakh, you just need to apply 50% of your gross receipt. It will be your deemed income. From that, no other deduction allowed, no remuneration or interest allowed, no further disallowances. WDV will be calculated as if depreciation is allowed. No need to maintain books, no need to audit. Advance tax to be paid only in 1 installment. If you show lower than 50%, then books to be maintained, audit to be done. Audit to be done only if your total income is more than basic exemption limit, replica of 44AD. However, in 44AD 5-year wala rule is there, 44ADA there is no rule of 5 years. Then 44AE. If you are any person, resident, non-resident, any person, in the year you are doing the business of plying, hiring, leasing of goods carriage, and total number of goods carriage in your ownership is not more than 10 at any time during the previous year, you can apply section 44A. Now, what is the presumptive rate in 44A? You have to see which kind of goods carriage you have, whether it is heavy goods vehicle or other than heavy goods vehicle. Heavy goods vehicle whose weight is more than 12,000 kg, that is more than 12 ton. Other than heavy, whose weight is not more than that. If you are applying heavy goods vehicle, then see what is the weight, what is the presumptive income? 1,000 per ton per month per vehicle. Let's say I have a truck having 15 ton for the entire year. Then what will be the presumptive income? 1,000 multiplied by 15 multiplied by 12 month. For how many trucks you have? Only one, so multiply by 1. If I would have 2, then multiply by 2, like this. If other than heavy, whose weight is less than 12 ton, then 7,500 per month per vehicle. There is no per ton. So 7,500 per month per vehicle, that will be a presumptive income. Now, once you are following this presumptive income, remember, you have to multiply by month of ownership, not the month of usage. How much month you have the ownership, for that you have to multiply. If you are following 44AE, if you are a partnership firm, additionally you can deduct remuneration and interest, unlike 44AD and 44ADA. However, no other deduction will be allowed, no other disallowances to be done. WDV will be calculated as if depreciation is allowed, no books to be maintained, no audit to be done. But if you show lower income, you have to maintain books, you have to conduct audit, compulsory audit, even though total income is less than basic exemption limit. And advance tax you have to pay as per 4 installment, not as per 1 installment. That is the difference. Now, the last point of this chapter, if I have any income which I have arrived by doing 2 operations, number 1 agricultural operation, number 2 business operation. For example, I have a farm in which tea is generated, tea is produced, and that tea I am taking as a raw material in my factory, from which I am doing some business operation, and afterwards I am selling those tea. So agricultural operation is also there, business operation is also there. The income related to agricultural operation is exempt under section 10 clause 1, and PGBP income is taxable. Then from my final net profit, how much percentage will be business, how much percentage will be agriculture? They have given the answer. If growing and manufacturing tea business, then 40% business income, 60% agriculture. Rubber business is there, 35% business, 65% agriculture. If you have coffee grown and cured, 25% business income, 75% agricultural income, which will be exempted. The rule number I have mentioned. If you are also doing roasting of the coffee, then 40% business, 60% agriculture. This, apart from this, any other items are there. For example, sugar can produce, then sugar is then converted, then sugar is sold. Wine, grapes are produced, wines are made, and then wines are sold. For all this kind of businesses, how to bifurcate the income, that we'll see in agricultural income chapter. If this operations, agricultural operations are done outside India, then remember, nothing will be bifurcated, 100% will be taxable. The bifurcation is only applicable if you have agricultural income in India. Are you understanding this, people? Yes or no? That was whole and sole PGBP chapter for you to repeat. 90% of the provisions I have covered over here. Thank you so much.